In this lesson, we're going to look at different types of investments that you can possibly use over your lifetime. Now, most people have heard about saving money, but a lot of people think that saving money means just putting it into a bank account and letting it sit there, which is not always the best idea if you want to actually earn some interest and make money in the long run. So what we're going to do today is look at a few of the different methods of saving money. So basically, where can you put your money to get different interest rates and different risks and rewards. And I will point out that this is just a quick overview of the types to kind of give you a general knowledge of what's going on. It's enough that for our quiz purposes, we can, ask questions about this and it's not too bad. If, however, in real life that you do have some significant amount of money you would like to invest, or even if you've got a little bit of money you'd like to invest, I would recommend talking to a financial advisor, somebody who knows a little bit about this, or even someone like your parents or someone at your bank or financial institution about options and how they work exactly and which one is probably the best for you in your situation. Because again, this is just a brief overview. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is the one that most people use, and that's just a savings account at your bank or credit union. So savings accounts are very convenient. Basically, you put money in and it sits there and it builds interest. The downside to it is that the amount of interest it builds is very low. Now, at the time that I'm writing this, the typical interest rate for savings accounts is about a third of a percent, which is pretty low, a third of a percent per year. And a few years back, it was down as low as a 20th of a percent a year, which was really, really unfortunate. So it's not a lot of interest. In fact, it's so little interest that inflation is actually going to overrule it. So even though your amount of money is actually increasing, the amount that you can buy with it is decreasing over time. So again, not a great idea for most people to put money in savings accounts. What a lot of people will do is they'll keep some money in a savings account so that they've got money on hand in case something comes up. They need to buy someone a gift, or the new video game system comes out they want to buy. They've got a little bit of money there, but they don't leave a lot of money in a savings account. They'll put the rest in a different type of investment, some of which it's a little bit harder to get your money out of. So just let's go through and do some examples. And we're going to be using some of the tools that we learned in our interest unit to solve these, but we're going to do them within the context of these different savings accounts. So question one, if you put $10,000 into a saving account for 5 years at 0.35% a year, how much interest would you make? And we'll use our compound interest information and we'll compound it annually. Okay, so let's write the information we have. We're putting 10,000 into a savings account. That's the principal. We're putting it in for 5 years. Now remember that since we are doing compound interest, we're not using variables R and T, which were the ones we used with simple interest. We're using I and N. So in this case, we're looking at N, which is the number of compounds, but if it's being compounded annually, which means once a year for 5 years, then there will be 5 compounds. Okay, so $10,000, 5 years, 0.35% a year, and since it's compounded annually, we don't have to convert that, so our I is 0.35%, which I'm going to point out as a decimal is 0.0035. And then we want to know how much interest we're going to make. All right, now going back to our compound interest equation, you might recall that there wasn't a capital I in it. So what we're actually going to do is do our A equals P times 1 plus I to the N. And we're going to solve for A. And you'll see why in just a second if you can't see it already. So 10,000 is our principal, 1.0035 to the exponent 5. And now I just punch that into my calculator. Remember to punch in the exponent first, so 1.0035 to the exponent 5. And now multiply that by 10,000, and you get $10,176.23. Not a particular amount or large amount of money, given that you put 10,000 in the first place. But if you want to find the amount of interest that you got, the amount of interest is just the amount you have now minus the amount that you put in at the beginning, which you probably don't even need to write as an equation because it's kind of obvious. But 10,176.23 minus 10,000 is 176.23. So for putting $10,000 into your savings account for 5 years, you built $176.23 of interest, which is, not nothing, but it's not a heck of a lot for 5 years of interest on a $10,000 investment. And because of that, we want to look at other possible investments that we could use. And we'll start with a fairly common one called a GIC, or Guaranteed Investment Certificates. Okay, so now we're talking about things that aren't just about interest, but other properties of different types of investments. So a few things to note about GICs is that, first of all, they are a no-risk investment, which means that you cannot lose money on them. Like, for instance, if you invested in stocks or bonds. So if you invest in stocks, which we're going to get to shortly, your money can go up or down depending on how well the companies or the whatever it is you're investing in does. GICs are guaranteed. They are an agreement that you loan a certain amount of money and you will get a certain amount of money back. Now, the interest rates you get on those are still relatively low, but they're at least reasonable. So you're looking at 3 to 4% a year at the moment. Now, again, these fluctuate over time. So, when you go to do this in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, they might only be 1% or they might be 7 or 8%. So this is why I don't want you to focus too much on the details of these things, just a general overview. And then when you're ready to invest, look into your options then. They come in different varieties. So it means that when you buy a GIC, essentially what happens is they guarantee they're going to give you a certain amount of money back, but they also expect you to keep that or to have that money for a certain amount of time before doing so. So to understand why that's true, think about being the person who's taking the investment. So let's say that the reason that they're paying you to borrow your money is because they want to open a restaurant. So if you give them $10,000 and they're like, okay, thank you, I'll give you back, $10,000 with 5% interest in 4 years. If you say, 3 months later, I'd like my 10,000 back now, they may have spent that money to actually, build the restaurant or invest in stock or something, or invest in, I should say, not stock, in product or food or chairs or whatever. And they may not have that money available, which is why GICs do have a time limit on them. They tell you how long it'll take. Now, normally GICs are from 1 to 5 years, 1 being the short ones, 5 being the long ones. They may come in other varieties. And again, these are things that change over time. So look into it when you're ready. All right, let's try question 2. Jyoti invests $500 in a GIC with a 5-year term. So basically means she can't get her money out for 5 years. At 2.4% compounded annually. Now you'll notice the 2.4% doesn't say per year. The rates are always going to be given per year. When we convert them into I's, that's a little different, but the actual rates in a question will always be per year if it's not stated. And in this case, it's compounded annually, so it doesn't matter anyway. How much will this be worth in 5 years when she cashes it out? Okay, so same idea. We're going to put down that Jyoti invests $500. That's our principal. It's a 5-year term compounded annually, so there'll be 5 compounds. N is 5. The interest rate is 2.4% a year, but since the compound rate is per year, that's also going to be our I. So 2.4% or 0.024. And how much will it be worth in 5 years? So that's our A value. So now we just use our equation. A equals P1 plus I to the N. So A is 500, 1.024 to the exponent 5. 1.024 to the exponent 5 gives us about 1.126. multiply that by 500, and we get about $562.95. And that's the answer to our question. So she puts $500 into the GIC now, and in 5 years she pulls out a $562.95. Not bad, but $62, well, exactly $62.95 interest. Let's take a look at Abe's situation. Abe invests $500 in a different 5-year GIC, which only pays 1.5% interest compounded annually, but may be cashed out at any time. How much will his investment be worth in 5 years? Okay, so let's again take a look at this and say principal is $500, N is still 5. The only thing that changes really is the I value, which becomes 1.5% or 0.015, and A is still our unknown. Oop, getting messy here. A equals P1 plus I to the exponent N. So that's 500 times 1.015 to the exponent 5. 1.015 to the exponent 5 is 1.077. Multiply that by 500, and we get $538.64. Okay, so now if we compare that to Joe T's investment, which obviously had a higher interest rate, Joe T gets out $563 roughly, and Abe gets out $538 and a bit. So I don't know, that's only about $25 difference, 24 and change. Now, while that is money in your pocket, there is the advantage here that this particular GIC allows cash to be taken out at any time. So you could go and cash it in after 2 years or 3 years. So which GIC would you choose and why? Now, I'm not going to answer this because this honestly is your opinion. But there is an advantage and a disadvantage to these. So Joe T's advantage is that she's going to get more money. But let's say her car breaks down in 2 years, and then she has to take out a loan at 15% interest to pay for it. Whereas Abe could take out his GIC in 2 years, and yeah, he makes a little less money, but the money's still there. It's still available to him. And this is in real life a very tough decision because you want access to your money in case something happens, but you want to make as much interest as you can. You want to build that money as much as possible, and there's a balance between those. So in some situations, what someone might do, just as an example, is maybe they'd put $250 into each of these two investments. So they get kind of the best of both worlds. They can get some of their money out, but the rest of it will build more interest. And again, this is completely up to you in your situation. And it depends on what your risk is and how long you can go without having that money. So whatever your answer is there, I'll leave that to you. The next one we're going to look at is bonds. And I'll be honest, if you want to know more about these, talk to a financial advisor. These are not my strong suit. But basically, they're arranged by governments or larger corporations, and they're a little bit like GICs, but not exactly. So what happens is you basically buy a bond. Think of it almost like buying anything that you can sell back to someone else. And, and the bond is worth a certain amount. And on its maturity date, you can cash it in kind of like a GIC and get back whatever interest rate was agreed upon. Now, what you can also do is sell those bonds to other people as investments before the maturity date. And it's really a buyer's market or a seller's market. It depends on what people are willing to pay and how badly people are trying to get rid of them. So if a bunch of people are trying to sell bonds then before the maturity dates, then the buyers can choose to offer less and get them at a good deal. And if very few people are doing it and it seems like a good investment, but the person maybe needs the money now, then selling off the bond, they may actually be able to make most of their money back. So there's a little bit of give and take there. But in other ways, they pretty much act like GICs. So let's take a look at example 3. And on June 22nd, 1995, James bought $10,000 worth of General Appliance Corporation bonds that paid 6% simple interest per year. Now, this is one of those situations where in real life they could do it because they basically know how long it's going to be before they cash it in anyway. So they're basically just saying, I'm going to sell it to you for this amount and I'm going to give you this amount later. So the fact that it's a simple interest calculation doesn't really matter. It's just an opportunity for us to practice simple interest. The bonds mature in 2015. If James sells his bonds before June 2nd, 2015, he might sell them for more than or less than $10,000. So for part A, we're going to use simple interest formula to determine how much interest James paid on June 2nd, or James was paid on June 2nd, and that should say 1996. Yeah, I don't like that word there, was paid. Let's take that out and put down how much interest James earned. So it doesn't mean he gets it yet. It just means that his bond would have been earning interest. So basically, it's been in for 1 year at this point. We want to know how much interest he's going to get. And we're told that the principal was $10,000. The interest rate is 6% a year, so we're using simple interest, so that's R. 6% or 0.06. And the time at this point, because the bond isn't at maturity yet, has only been 1 year. So that means the amount of interest is just going to be equal to PRT, or 10,000 times 0.06 times 1, which is just $600. So it looks like he's going to be making $600 in interest every year for the entire term of the bond, which is 20 years. Now, if he holds on to it for the full 20 years up till 2015, how much interest will he earn? Pretty much same equation. We don't know I. Principal is still 10,000. The interest rate is still 6% or 0.06. The only thing that really changed is now we have 20 years. So I equals 10,000, 0.06 times 20. And so we get basically the same answer we got last time times 20, which is $12,000. Okay, $12,000 interest on a $10,000 investment. That's not at all bad. Now keep in mind, this is 20 years later. So even though, James put in 10,000 and took out 22,000 in total, he may not be able to buy much more with it because 20 years of inflation does make a difference. Now let's look at part C and see what happens if he sells them for $9,200 after owning them for 8 years. How much will his $10,000 have earned in the 8 years? Well, he put 10,000 in. He took got 9,200 for them. That means he just lost $800. I don't think we need any formal equation for that one to say that he put 10,000 in and he got 9,200 for it. So 10,000 minus 9,200 is $800. Okay, so it is possible to lose money, but that's the consequence of taking a little bit more risk with a higher interest rate. All right, let's go into stocks. Now, I will say that for most people, stocks are fairly complicated. I'm going to give you just the quickest of overviews. But again, you should really just ask an advisor if you're ever going to consider looking into stocks. And I just looked at this now and I realized that for some reason the word shares has an S at the beginning of that line and the rest of the word at the beginning of that, or the end of the beginning of the next line. So let's fix that right off the bat. And basically what you do is some company out there, so think of a company maybe you like, I don't know, let's say, actually I don't want to say a real company because then it looks like I'm promoting them, but some company that sells some product you really like. And you say, I would like to invest in you. So what you do is you buy stocks. And the reason the company does that is that by buying and selling stocks, they can get money. Basically, they're selling little portions of their company away, but they're getting money that they can use to build up that company and make it grow faster. So think about you, and let's make the easiest possible example where you have a little lemonade stand, and your little lemonade stand makes, $50 a day, which is fantastic. But someone comes along and says, I'm willing to invest in your company. I'll buy half of your company for $1,000. And you take that $1,000, and even though you've given up half your company, you can build 5 more lemonade stands. So you now have 6 lemonade stands. You're making 6 times as much. Yeah, you're giving away half of it, but you're still taking home 3 times as much as you were before because you were given that opportunity to expand. And that's usually why companies offer stocks, is so that they can use that money to expand. And then once, unfortunately, that started, once people own the bits of their company, they continue to own them. So that's what a stock is, and you usually buy shares or pieces of the company, and these are pretty arbitrary. Sometimes the company will sell off little itty bitty pieces and charge a fairly small amount for them, or sometimes they make the pieces bigger and charge more. What is defined as one unit or one share is really up to the company. So don't get too caught up on, well, these ones are really cheap, so they must be a better deal. You could just be buying smaller portions. So some company might only have 20 shares and you buy one of them for $1 million. And some company may have 10 billion shares and you buy, 100,000 of them at a buck a piece. So anyway, you buy these stocks. Now, as the company does what it does, some companies continue to make more profit, in which case the value of the stocks goes up because you're a partial owner of it. And sometimes the stock value goes down because the company's not doing so well. So that often happens. Like a company often does well if, say, for instance, when we look at things like Xbox versus PlayStation, whenever a new system comes out, the company who gets theirs kind of out first usually tends to raise their stock a little bit, and then the one that's a little behind tends to lose a little bit in their stock. Now, over the coming year, as they both kind of come out, those can fluctuate. Maybe one of those systems that they come out with doesn't do so well because it's got some flaws in it or it doesn't have enough good games or something. So that stock will drop a little and the other one may go up because it's got more features or whatever. So there is a little bit of a gamble in stocks, but you tend to make more money off of it. So let's take a look at just a couple of sample questions of things that you might deal with if you were buying or selling stocks. So question 4. Mary buys 1,000 shares of Acme Corporation at $8.50 per share. She pays $120 commission to buy them. So basically what this means is you can't go in and buy it yourself. You pay a stockbroker who does this for you. Sometimes they'll pay or they'll charge a dollar commission. More often than not, I believe they charge a percentage commission. So basically, they get some like 0.2% or 1% or something of your shares. Again, not a stockbroker, so I'm not really into that stuff for the exact values, but I think you get the general idea. The shares do not pay a dividend. We kind of hinted at that in the last question, but a dividend is just sometimes the company can set these up so that every year or whatever, they give you a little bit of the profits. So basically what means is that your shares don't go up in value as much, but you get some of that money cashed out then. So some people like that because they can basically, if they invest a big amount of money, they get some money back each year. So they've got spending money to work with. And some people would rather just have their stocks continue to increase in value and then sell them off when they need money. But in this case, we're just going to say that it does not have a dividend. So it does not pay out every year or every whatever. So if Mary sells the shares for $10.75 per share and pays $134 commission, how much would she have earned buying and selling these shares? Now, I've purposely left out how long she invested them for in this because it doesn't necessarily matter. Um, Sometimes shares can increase or decrease a huge amount in one day, and sometimes it can increase by or decrease by a very small amount over 5 years. Depends on how the company's doing and what fluctuates. Either way, if she buys them at $8.50 a share and pays $120, so let's take a look at how much she put in. So she bought 1,000 shares. Now this isn't a simple interest equation by any means. It's just let's logic our way through it. She paid 1,000 shares times $8.50 a share. And then she also paid $120 commission. Okay, so this is how much she paid. So we'll just punch that into a calculator. 1,000 times 8.5 plus 120. So she paid $8,620. And how much does she get? Well, she gets 1,000 times 10.75, but then she loses $134 of that to commission, so we minus 134. And so we just do 1,000 times 10.75 minus 134 equals $10,616. So how much did she actually make? So her earnings would be the amount she got minus the amount she paid. So 10,616 minus 8620 means she made $1,996. Now again, if this was over a month, that's pretty awesome. If this was over 10 years, uh, maybe not so awesome. But it depends. And stock markets, usually people like it's very stressful when you have money in stocks because one day it goes up $1,000 and you're like ecstatic, and the next day it goes down $1,500 and you're depressed. And there's a lot of people that I know that have bought stocks that they waste a huge portion of their lives just watching to see them go up and down at every minute. And the advice that I've heard is that if you buy stocks like this, your best bet is to sit back, don't look, and just wait. Because over the long run, they tend to make money. Of course, some companies will go under, so that's not always true. But anyway, again, talk to a financial advisor because I am not one of those. Part B. If Mary had to sell the shares for $7.50 to pay and pay $110 commission, how much would she have lost buying and selling these shares? Okay, so if we compare that to the question we did above, she's still paying the same amount. She's still paying the $8,620, but the amount that she gets is different. So she's going to get 1,000 times 750, and she's going to lose 110 of that to commission. So that's going to be 1,000 times 750 is 7,500 minus 110 commission is 7,390. And then just like before, the amount that she lost is going to be the amount she put in. Or sorry, the amount she gets. I guess really it doesn't matter. It depends on how you look at it. Since we're looking at how much she lost and we know that that's a positive number, we'll just do big number minus little number. So 8620 minus 7930, or sorry, 7390. My dyslexia is coming out. And when I punch that into the calculator, turns out she lost $230. So again, that's the risks that you take when you're playing in the stock market. Okay, the last one we're going to look at is actually strongly related to stocks with one advantage and one disadvantage. So these are called mutual funds. I said one advantage and one disadvantage. There's actually several. So the idea behind a mutual fund is that there are companies out there whose job it is, who make their money based on looking for good investments. So they basically buy and sell stocks. What they do then is they take these stocks and they bundle them together into packages called mutual funds and sell those. So what you're essentially doing in a mutual fund is buying a package of stocks. So think of it this way. Let's say that right now there's those video game companies. We've got Microsoft, we've got Sony, and they're competing. And we know that the video game market is hot and that it's going to make money, but we don't know which company is going to be the one that makes the money and which one may lose it. So what we do is instead of buying stocks in Xbox or stocks in Sony, we buy stocks in both. And then as one loses money and the other gains money, our idea is that we hopefully balance it out and still make money overall. And if we know that people are going to buy games, we just don't know who from, then that's actually a really good strategy. It doesn't matter which of the two companies does better or worse. We win either way. Now, the downside is that one of the stocks will go up and one will go down. So we're not going to make as much money if we invested as in just a good stock, but we're not going to lose money like we would have if we had invested in the poorer stock. And there are all kinds of mutual funds, basically anything that you could imagine out there. Some common ones might be you invest in metals. So you buy a little bit of stock in gold mining and nickel mining and iron mining and aluminum mining, knowing that we do need resources. But if one of those metals all of a sudden is like, oh, we don't need that anymore because we can make this easier. So we don't need copper anymore because we found a nickel alloy that is cheaper and lets us conduct electricity to make copper wires, to replace copper wiring. Basically, if one of those goes down, one of the others will go up. There's ones for fast food restaurants. There's one for other restaurants. There's ones for, like, again, energy. So you could invest in a mutual fund that has some gas, some oil, some wind, some nuclear, some um, what's the other, solar, etc. So the idea there is that we know people are going to continue to need energy, so investing in that area is going to make money. We just don't know which of those technologies is going to necessarily win out. And so mutual funds are a good way of making sure that your profits are kind of steady and a little bit more safe, but we don't tend to make as much money as if we had just invested in like the one really good stock. So advantages are we have a whole bunch of areas covered. So even if one tanks, we don't lose all of our money because usually something else goes up because of it. The other nice thing is that these are actually done by people who specialize in investing, who actually research whatever the things are that they're investing in. So they tend to make good choices as opposed to an individual who usually just reads an internet article and decides that's a good company to invest in. You can invest any amount you want. You don't have to buy like one stock. You just say, I'm going to invest $800 in mutual funds, buy me whatever it buys. And they take care of the record keeping for you. So you don't have to watch it as much. Incidentally, and I'm just going to say this because I feel it's worthwhile, is that my personal investments are in mutual funds because I find it safe and it pays a decent amount of interest. Not a huge amount, but compared to the others we've looked at, other than possibly stocks, it does okay. Now, the disadvantage is that you do pay management fees and expenses. Now, usually, again, that's a percentage of whatever you make on these. So if it makes 3% interest, then you might pay 0.5 of that 3 and only see 0.25 or 2.5% interest. But likewise, if it makes 10% interest, you might only see 9.5, but 9.5 is still pretty good. You don't get a lot of control over your investment decisions. but you do have some still because you can always change mutual funds. So right now I actually have two different mutual funds. One is a higher risk and a higher risk with a higher percentage or interest, and one is a lower risk with lower interest. And I can rebalance those as I see fit. So usually I rebalance them, so it's about half of each. And then finally, if the person who's running the fund screws up and invests in bad companies, you kind of pay the penalty for it. But again, they're still probably going to make, on the average, more good decisions than you would as an individual. So not a huge risk there. All right, let's just try a couple of questions with mutual funds and then we'll call it a day. So Kylie invested $2,000 in precious metal mutual funds. Kyle invested $2,000 in a precious metal mutual fund. He paid $5.73 per unit. The fee is included in the price. How many units, rounded to 3 decimal places, did he buy? Again, this isn't a simple interest question or a compound interest question. It's just a common sense question. If we take the amount he spent and we divide it by the cost per unit, $5.73, that should give us the number of units. 2,000 divided by 5.73 is 349, and we're told to keep it to 3 decimal places, so 040. So that's how many mutual fund units he's purchased. And again, how much a unit actually is worth, or I shouldn't say worth, we know exactly what they're worth, $5.73, but what it actually represents doesn't really matter. Whether it's 1% of a company that's small or sorry, 1% of a company that's big or 10% of a company that's small, it still works out to be the same. So Kyle sold the mutual fund units for $5.87 each. How much did Kyle earn or lose buying and selling these mutual funds? Well, we can see that it's more than what he paid for them, and we're told that the fees are included in the price, so we don't have to worry about that. So we know he made money. Well, there's a couple ways we could approach this one. We'd find out how much he paid in total, or sorry, we know how much he paid in total. That was $2,000. And we know how much he sells them for with the number of units. So actually, let's do that. He sells 349.040 units at $5.87 each. I'll just make a little note there that that's what he sold. So that number times 5.87, and that would be 2,048.87. Now, I kept the exact value in my calculator from part A. So if your rounding is a little bit different than this, if you cleared your calculator and put it in from scratch, it'll be a little wee bit different possibly, but not enough to worry about. Okay, so he bought $2,000 worth and sold it for 2,048. So I think without too much of an equation, we can say he made $48.87. And again, maybe a little bit off because of rounding, but that's okay. All right, I think that's enough of an overview to give you an idea of what kind of options are out there, and hopefully the big takeaway from this lesson that you'll get is that if you actually are going to invest real money at some point, that you don't go back to your grade 11 notebook from math class. You actually talk to a financial professional, someone whose entire job is dealing with this, and get good advice from them. If you do that, you should be in good shape. But for now, for the purposes of our course, I've got some practice problems there you can work through. Remember, we know how to deal with interest problems, and then most of the others are just kind of common sense, easier problems. The answers at the bottom, a couple of them are exact, a few of them, most of them are approximate, but it's enough that'll tell you whether or not you're right or wrong. If you're having trouble with these, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next lesson.